In the unforgiving wilderness of 1883 Colorado Territory, where death rode the wind and mercy was scarcer than water in a drought, love sometimes emerged from the most unlikely places. This is the story of a woman who believed she was broken beyond repair, and the cowboy who proved that some things are worth fighting for, even when the person you're fighting for has given up on herself. Her name was Evangeline Sterling, though everyone called her Ava, and at 24, she possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that made men forget their own names and women whisper behind their fans. With hair like spun gold and eyes the color of summer sky, she had been the belle of Denver society, engaged to the wealthiest banker's son and destined for a life of comfort and privilege. But the frontier had a way of stripping away such illusions, and on a blood-soaked morning in late September, Eva's gilded world shattered like glass against stone. The wagon train attack had lasted less than an hour, but it had been enough to destroy everything she thought she knew about life, safety, and her own strength. The Crimson Canyon Gang had swept down on the settlers like avenging angels of death, their guns blazing and their hearts empty of anything resembling human compassion. When the smoke cleared and the screaming stopped, Eva found herself trapped beneath an overturned wagon, her legs crushed and her spirit broken, watching the vultures already beginning to circle overhead. But sometimes, when all hope seems lost, salvation arrives in the form of a man who refuses to accept defeat. His name was Colt McCready, and he was everything Eva's refined upbringing had taught her to fear and avoid. A bounty hunter with calloused hands and scars that told stories of violence and survival, he stood 6 feet of lean muscle and quiet authority, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. At 32, he had seen enough of the world's cruelty to know that kindness was a luxury most people couldn't afford. But he had also learned that some battles were worth fighting, no matter the cost. When Colt found Eva pinned beneath that wagon, delirious with pain, and begging him to leave her to die with what remained of her dignity, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He didn't see a ruined socialite or a burden to be abandoned. He saw a woman who had survived something unsurvivable, and he knew with bone-deep certainty that her story wasn't over yet. "Leave me here to die," she had whispered, her voice barely audible above the desert wind. "I'm already broken. I'm no good to anyone now." And his answer, delivered with the quiet conviction of a man who never made promises he couldn't keep, would echo through the canyons and mesas of Colorado Territory like a declaration of war against fate itself. "Never. You belong with me." What followed was a journey that tested every assumption about strength, healing, and what it truly means to belong to someone. In a land where weakness meant death and vulnerability was a luxury no one could afford, Ava and Colt discovered that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't a gun or a fist, but the unwavering belief that every soul deserves to be fought for. This is their story, a tale of possessive protection that burned hotter than desert sun, of a woman learning to see herself through the eyes of a man who never knew how to quit, and of love that refused to accept surrender, even when surrender seemed like the merciful choice. Because sometimes the most beautiful flowers bloom in the harshest ground, and sometimes the deepest love grows from the darkest moments. Sometimes being claimed by the right person is the first step toward reclaiming yourself. The smell of death and smoke still hung thick in the air when Colt McCready crested the ridge overlooking Crimson Canyon. His horse, a steel-gray stallion named Rebel, snorted uneasily at the scent of blood and gunpowder that drifted up from the valley below. Colt's weathered hand moved instinctively to the Colt 45 at his hip, the weapon that had given him his name and saved his life more times than he cared to count. What he saw in the canyon made his jaw clench with cold fury. The wagon train that had passed through Broken Rock 2 days ago lay scattered across the desert floor like broken toys, their contents spilled and burning under the merciless Colorado sun. Bodies lay where they had fallen, and already the buzzards were gathering, their black wings casting ominous shadows on the blood-soaked earth. Colt had been tracking the Crimson Canyon Gang for 3 weeks, following a trail of robbery and murder that stretched from Denver to the Mexican border. The bounty on their leader, Jeremiah "Red" Hawkins, was $5,000, enough to keep Colt comfortable for a year. But as he surveyed the carnage below, money was the last thing on his mind. He spurred Rebel down the canyon wall, his experienced eyes already cataloging the scene. The attack had been swift and brutal, typical of Hawkins' style. No survivors left to tell tales, no witnesses to describe the raiders. Or so it appeared. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it over the whisper of desert wind. A moan, soft and desperate, coming from beneath an overturned supply wagon near the creek bed. Colt dismounted and approached cautiously, his hand never leaving his gun. Wounded people could be dangerous, especially when they had nothing left to lose. But when he knelt beside the wagon and peered into the shadowy space beneath it, what he saw stopped his breath entirely. A woman lay trapped under the heavy wooden frame, her golden hair fanned out like spilled sunlight across the dusty ground. Her dress, once a fine blue silk that probably cost more than most men made in a month, was torn and stained with blood and dirt. But it was her face that hit Colt like a physical blow. Even pale with pain and streaked with tears, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "Miss?" he said gently, his voice softer than it had been in years. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, the bluest eyes he'd ever seen, like summer sky after a storm. For a moment they were unfocused, lost in delirium. Then they found his face and widened with a mixture of relief and terror. You're not one of them," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, ma'am. Name's Colt McCready. I'm going to get you out of there." But as he examined the situation more closely, Colt's heart sank. The wagon had her pinned from the waist down, its massive weight pressing against her legs. Even if he could lift it, which would require more strength than any one man possessed, the damage might already be done. "My legs," she said, reading his expression with heartbreaking clarity. "I can't feel them anymore." Colt met her gaze steadily, unwilling to offer false comfort. "How long have you been trapped?" Since dawn, I think. They came just as we were breaking camp." Her voice cracked with remembered terror. "They killed everyone. My fiancé, my maid, the guide. Everyone." "What's your name?" "Evangeline. Evangeline Sterling. But everyone calls me Eva." She closed her eyes, tears leaking from beneath her lashes. "Or they did, when I was someone worth calling by name." Something twisted in Colt's chest at the defeat in her voice. This woman, this beautiful, brave woman who had survived a massacre that killed everyone else, thought she was worthless because she was injured. "Eva," he said firmly, and her eyes opened again. "I'm going to get you out of there, and then I'm going to take care of you. Do you understand me?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Take care of me? Look at me. I'm ruined. Even if I survive this, I'll never walk again. I'll never be able to take care of myself, never be a real wife to anyone. I'm nothing but a burden now." "You're wrong." The quiet conviction in his voice made her stare at him. Colt had faced down gunfighters and outlaws, had tracked killers across 1,000 miles of hostile territory. But he had never felt as determined about anything as he did about saving this woman. "Please," Eva whispered, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Just leave me here. Let me die with what's left of my dignity. Don't condemn yourself to a life of caring for someone who can never give you anything in return." Colt studied her face for a long moment, memorizing every feature. The delicate curve of her cheekbones, the determined set of her chin despite her words of surrender, the way her golden hair caught the light even in the shadow of the wagon. Then he reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Eva Sterling," he said quietly, "you listen to me very carefully. I don't know what kind of men you've known in your life, but I'm going to tell you something about the kind of man I am. When I find something worth protecting, I protect it. When I find something worth keeping, I keep it. And when I find something that belongs with me, I don't let it go. But I'm broken." "You're alive," he interrupted. "You're beautiful. You're brave enough to survive what no one should have to survive, and you're mine now. Those legs of yours? We'll figure that out. Your dignity? Still intact, because there's no shame in being cared for by someone who wants to do the caring." Eva stared at him in shock. "Yours?" You don't even know me. I know enough, Colt said, already moving to examine the wagon from different angles. I know you've got more fight in you than you realize, or you'd be dead already. I know you're the kind of woman who thinks about other people even when you're the one in need of help. And I know that from this moment forward, your welfare is my responsibility. You can't just claim me like that. I'm not a piece of property. Colt paused in his examination of the wagon and looked back at her, something fierce and possessive blazing in his storm gray eyes. No, you're not property. You're something infinitely more valuable. You're the woman I'm going to spend the rest of my life protecting, whether you think you need it or not. The certainty in his voice sent strange shivers through Ava's body. No man had ever spoken to her like that, with such absolute conviction, such unwavering determination. Her fiancé back in Denver had been proper and polite, full of flowery speeches about her beauty and social graces. But this rough, dangerous-looking cowboy spoke as if he could see straight through to her soul. You don't understand, she tried again. I'm damaged goods now. No decent man would want. Good thing I've never been accused of being particularly decent, Colt said with a grim smile. Now stop trying to talk me out of saving you and start thinking about how we're going to get you healthy again. He moved to the back end of the wagon, where the frame had twisted during the crash. If he could create enough leverage. What are you doing? Eva asked. Getting you out of there. Colt found a fallen tree branch, thick and sturdy enough to serve as a pry bar. This is going to hurt, Eva. When I lift this wagon, even for a few seconds, the blood rushing back to your legs is going to be agony. But I need you to help me. Can you pull yourself out when I give the word? Eva looked at her arms, testing their strength. Her shoulders and back were bruised but not broken. I think so. That's my girl. The words slipped out naturally, and Colt felt a jolt of possession at how right they sounded. On my count. 1, 2, 3. Colt threw all his considerable strength against the makeshift lever, his muscles straining against the enormous weight. The wagon lifted perhaps 6 inches. Not much, but enough. Eva bit back a scream as sensation flooded back into her lower body, but she used her arms to drag herself clear of the crushing weight. The moment she was free, Colt let the wagon crash back down and was beside her in an instant, his hands moving over her legs with gentle efficiency, checking for breaks and damage. Can you feel this? He asked, pressing carefully along her right leg. Yes, Eva gasped, tears of relief and pain streaming down her face. Yes, I can feel it. Oh God, I can feel everything. Bruised, maybe some torn muscles, but nothing broken, Colt said, his voice rough with relief. You're going to be sore for weeks, probably limping for months, but you're going to walk again, Eva. You're going to be fine. How can you be sure? Colt gathered her into his arms, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Eva had never been held like this, with such careful strength, such protective tenderness. Against her will, she found herself relaxing into his embrace, her head falling naturally to rest against his broad shoulder. Because I'm going to make sure of it, he said simply, and because I don't accept failure when it comes to the people who belong to me. There's that word again, Eva murmured, too exhausted and overwhelmed to maintain her protests. Belong. Get used to it, Colt said, carrying her toward his horse. Because from now on, Eva Sterling, that's exactly what you do. You belong with me. As he settled her carefully in front of him on Rebel's back, Eva felt something she hadn't experienced since the attack began. Safety. This strange, dangerous man with his possessive words and gentle hands had claimed her as surely as if he'd branded her. And for the first time since waking up trapped under that wagon, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over after all. Behind them, the canyon held its secrets and its dead. But ahead lay something neither of them had expected to find in this harsh land. The beginning of a love that would prove stronger than fear, deeper than doubt, and more enduring than the mountains themselves. The hideout Colt brought her to wasn't what Eva had expected. Hidden in a box canyon about 10 miles from the massacre site, it was more than just a rough shelter. It was a genuine home carved from the wilderness. A sturdy log cabin sat nestled against the canyon wall, with a covered porch that caught the morning sun and a stone chimney that spoke of warm fires on cold nights. A small corral held several horses, and Eva could see the glint of a stream running behind the house. "You live here?" she asked as Colt carefully dismounted and then lifted her down from Rebel's back. "When I'm not tracking someone across half the territory," he replied, carrying her toward the cabin. "Built it myself over the past 5 years. Figured a man needed a place to come home to, even if he didn't have anyone to share it with." The way he said those last words with a meaningful glance at Eva's face made her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with her injuries. Inside, the cabin was even more impressive. The main room featured a stone fireplace with 2 comfortable chairs positioned nearby, a sturdy dining table, and shelves lined with more books than Eva would have expected a bounty hunter to own. Everything was meticulously clean and well-maintained, revealing a side of Colt McCready that seemed at odds with his dangerous profession. "You read," Eva observed, surprised despite herself. "Amazing what a man can learn when he has long winter nights and no company," Colt said, settling her carefully on a leather sofa near the fireplace. "Now let's get a proper look at those legs." Eva's cheeks flushed. That's not appropriate. We're not married, and I'm perfectly capable of examining myself." Colt gave her a look that was equal parts amused and exasperated. "Eva, darling, I've seen plenty of injured people in my time. This isn't about propriety. It's about making sure you heal properly. Now, are you going to let me help you, or are we going to have our first fight while you're still too weak to put up a decent argument?" "Our first fight?" Eva's voice rose slightly. "You're awfully presumptuous for someone I met 3 hours ago." "Presumptuous?" Colt knelt beside the sofa, his gray eyes holding hers with steady intensity. "Eva, I carried you out of hell itself, and I'm going to nurse you back to health in my own home. I'd say we're well past the point of standing on ceremony." Before Eva could protest further, Colt's hands were moving with gentle efficiency, carefully examining her legs through the torn fabric of her dress. His touch was clinical but tender, and Eva found herself holding her breath as his fingers traced along her calves and ankles, checking for swelling and damage. "Bruising is extensive, but the bones are solid," he murmured, his voice taking on a professional tone that reminded Eva he'd clearly done this before. "You're going to be stiff and sore for weeks, but with proper rest and care, you'll make a full recovery." "And what makes you such an expert on medical care?" Eva asked, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled wherever he touched her. 6 years as a cavalry scout," Colt replied, moving to a cabinet and pulling out supplies, clean bandages, a bottle of whiskey, and various herbs Eva didn't recognize. "You learn to patch people up when you're 3 days from the nearest doctor and your partner has an arrow in his shoulder." He returned with a basin of warm water and began cleaning the cuts and scrapes on her legs with surprising gentleness. Eva bit her lip to keep from making any sound, but she couldn't hide the way she tensed at the sting of the antiseptic. "Easy," Colt murmured, his voice dropping to a soothing rumble. "I know it hurts, but we need to make sure these don't get infected." "I can do this myself," Eva said through gritted teeth, though they both knew it wasn't true. She could barely sit up without assistance, let alone tend to wounds she couldn't even see properly. "I'm sure you could, under normal circumstances," Colt agreed, not pausing in his careful ministrations. "But these aren't normal circumstances, and you're not alone anymore. Get used to being taken care of, Eva. It's going to be happening a lot from now on." "You can't just decide that," Eva protested, though her voice lacked conviction. The truth was, being cared for with such gentle competence felt better than she wanted to admit. "I'm not your responsibility." Colt paused in his work and looked up at her, his expression serious. "Yes, you are. The moment I decided to pull you out from under that wagon, you became my responsibility. And before you start arguing about it again, let me ask you something. Where exactly were you planning to go when you're healed?" The question hit Eva like a physical blow. She hadn't thought that far ahead, had been too focused on the simple fact of survival to consider what came next. I suppose I could return to Denver. My father has business associates there who might take pity on you." Colt's voice was gentle but implacable. "Might find you a position as a governess or companion to some wealthy family." Is that the life you want? Eva's chin lifted with automatic pride. It would be an honest living. So would staying here with me. Colt finished bandaging her legs and sat back on his heels, his gaze never leaving her face. Ava, I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a home, a place where you belong, someone who wants to take care of you not because it's his duty, but because it's his pleasure. You don't know me well enough to make such an offer, Eva said, but her heart was beating faster at the intensity in his eyes. I know enough. Colt stood and moved to the fireplace, adding wood to bring the flames higher. I know you're strong enough to survive something that killed everyone else around you. I know you're brave enough to worry about being a burden to me even when you're the one who needs help. I know you're beautiful enough to take my breath away and stubborn enough to argue with me even when I'm trying to save your life. That's not the same as really knowing someone, Eva insisted, though she could feel her resolve weakening with every word he spoke. Colt returned to his chair across from her, his elbows resting on his knees as he leaned forward. Then we'll get to know each other. We've got plenty of time. And what if you don't like what you learn about me? What if I don't like what I learn about you? A slow smile spread across Colt's face, the first real smile Eva had seen from him, and it transformed his entire countenance. Darling, I'm a bounty hunter who's killed more men than I care to count, and who lives alone in the middle of nowhere. If you can overlook that, I'm pretty sure I can handle whatever secrets you're hiding. Despite herself, Eva felt her lips twitching toward a smile in response. I might snore. I'll buy earplugs. I might be terrible at cooking. I've been feeding myself for years. I think I can manage. I might have nightmares about the attack. Colt's expression softened, all traces of humor disappearing. Then I'll hold you until they pass. The simple sincerity in his voice made Eva's breath catch. No one had ever offered to comfort her nightmares before. Her fiancé back in Denver had been more concerned with her maintaining proper composure than with her actual feelings. You make it sound so simple, she whispered. Maybe it is simple, Colt replied. Maybe we complicate things by thinking too much instead of just feeling. And what are you feeling right now? Colt was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made Eva feel exposed and cherished at the same time. I'm feeling like I've been waiting my whole life for someone to take care of, and I didn't even know it until I found you trapped under that wagon. I'm feeling like every bad thing that's ever happened to me was worth it, because it led me to you. And I'm feeling like if you try to leave me when you're healed, I might just have to follow you to the ends of the earth to bring you back. The possessive promise in his voice sent shivers down Eva's spine. That's quite presumptuous. That's quite honest, Colt corrected. I don't see the point in pretending to be something I'm not. I'm a possessive man, Eva. When something is mine, I protect it. When someone belongs with me, I don't let them go. And you think I belong with you? I know you do. He stood and moved toward the kitchen area. Now you need to eat something and then get some rest. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor, Eva pointed out, though she had to admit the thought of food made her stomach growl with hunger. No, but I'm the closest thing you're going to get out here, and I'm the man who's going to be taking care of you whether you like it or not. Colt began pulling ingredients from various cupboards and shelves. Might as well get used to it, darling. This is your life now. As Eva watched him move around the kitchen with competent efficiency, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, this new life he was offering might not be such a terrible thing after all. She was tired of being afraid, tired of feeling broken, tired of believing that she had nothing worthwhile to offer anyone. Maybe it was time to let someone else be strong for a while. Maybe it was time to discover what it felt like to truly belong somewhere. Maybe it was time to stop fighting and start healing, in more ways than one. 3 days into her recovery, Eva discovered that Colt McCready was not at all what she had expected from a bounty hunter. He woke before dawn each morning, quietly building up the fire and preparing coffee before she even stirred. When she finally opened her eyes, she would find him sitting in the chair across from the sofa, reading one of his many books and waiting for her to wake naturally. You don't have to watch over me like that, she said on the third morning, accepting the cup of coffee he offered with hands that barely trembled now. I'm not watching over you, Colt replied, though the gentle smile in his eyes betrayed him. I'm enjoying the view. Ava felt heat rise in her cheeks. Even disheveled from sleep, wearing one of his shirts that hung to her knees because her dress had been too damaged to salvage, she was hardly at her most presentable. I must look terrible. You look like you're healing, Colt said, settling back in his chair with his own coffee. And you look like you slept through the night without nightmares for the first time since the attack. He was right, Eva realized with surprise. She had slept deeply and peacefully, her body finally beginning to trust that she was safe. How do you know I was having nightmares before? Because you talk in your sleep, Colt said gently. And because I've had my share of them. I recognize the signs. You have nightmares too? Colt was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes focused on the flames dancing in the fireplace. A man doesn't live the life I've lived without collecting a few ghosts along the way. Something in his voice made Eva set down her coffee and really look at him. In the soft morning light, she could see details she'd missed before. The small scar that ran from his left temple to his jawline. The way his hands bore the calluses not just of hard work, but of violence. The shadows that sometimes flickered in his eyes when he thought she wasn't watching. Tell me about them, she said softly. Your ghosts. Colt's gaze snapped to hers, surprise evident in his expression. That's not exactly breakfast conversation, darling. Neither is the massacre that killed my fiancé and left me trapped under a wagon, Eva pointed out, but it's part of who we are now. If I'm going to stay here, and I'm beginning to think I might, then I want to know who you really are, Colt McCready. Not just the man who saved me, but the man who needs saving himself. The insight in her words seemed to catch Colt off guard. He set down his coffee and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the floor between them. I wasn't always a bounty hunter, he said finally. Started out as a cavalry officer, fresh out of West Point and full of ideas about honor and duty and protecting the innocent. What changed? War, Colt said simply. The kind of war where the lines between right and wrong get so blurred, you can't tell which side you're fighting for anymore. I saw good men do terrible things because they were ordered to. I saw terrible men do good things for reasons I'll never understand. And eventually I realized that the uniform didn't make me any more or less capable of choosing right from wrong than any other man. Eva could hear the pain in his voice, old and deep and carefully buried. So you left the army. They kicked me out, Colt admitted with a bitter laugh. Turns out questioning your commanding officer's orders to burn out a peaceful Cheyenne village is considered insubordination, especially when you refuse to carry out those orders and convince half your unit to stand down with you. You saved innocent people. I tried to. Wasn't enough to save them all. Colt's hands clenched into fists. The village was destroyed anyway, just with a different unit. Women and children died because I wasn't strong enough or smart enough to stop it completely. Eva set down her coffee and, despite the lingering soreness in her legs, moved to kneel beside Colt's chair. Her hand covered one of his fists, and she felt some of the tension leave his muscles at her touch. That wasn't your fault, she said firmly. You did what you could with the choices you had. Did I? Colt's eyes met hers, and she saw years of guilt and regret reflected there. Sometimes I wonder if I quit too easily, if I should have found another way. And sometimes good people have to make impossible choices, Eva replied, her thumb stroking across his knuckles. The fact that it still haunts you proves you're not the kind of man who makes those choices lightly. Colt turned his hand palm up, catching her fingers in his. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise, Eva said with a small smile. I'm just someone who recognizes a good man when she sees one, even when he can't see it himself. A good man? Colt's grip on her hand tightened. Eva, I've killed 17 men as a bounty hunter. I've tracked criminals across hostile territory and brought them back dead more often than alive. I live alone because most people find me too dangerous to be around. And yet you've been nothing but gentle with me, Eva pointed out. You could have left me to die. You could have taken advantage of my helpless condition. Instead, you've spent 3 days nursing me back to health without asking for anything in return. I'm asking for something now, Colt said quietly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Eva's breath caught. What? A chance, he said simply. A chance to prove that I can be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. A chance to show you that the life I'm offering isn't just about protecting you from the world, but about building something together. Colt, Eva began, but he pressed on. I know you're still healing. I know you're probably thinking about that life you left behind in Denver, wondering if you should try to go back to it. But Eva, what if you didn't have to choose between being safe and being happy? What if you could have both? Eva studied his face, seeing hope and vulnerability warring with the determination that seemed to define him. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to consider staying. Not just until you're healed, but permanently. I'm asking you to let me court you properly, to give us time to see what we could build together. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. I'm asking you to belong with me by choice, not just by circumstance. The word belong still sent shivers through Eva, but now they were shivers of anticipation rather than fear. The truth was, she had been thinking about Denver less and less with each passing day. The life she'd been living there seemed pale and restrictive compared to the freedom she felt here, even while recovering from serious injuries. What would courting look like? She asked quietly. Out here, just the two of us. A slow smile spread across Colt's face. Well, I'd start by making sure you had proper clothes and anything else you needed to be comfortable. Then I'd probably try to impress you with my cooking, which admittedly isn't much to brag about. I'd read to you in the evenings, teach you to shoot if you wanted to learn, show you the beautiful places I've found in these mountains. And then when you were ready and not a moment before, I'd ask you to marry me, Colt said simply. But only if you wanted me to. Only if you felt the same way I do. And how do you feel? Eva asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. Colt reached up with his free hand and cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. Like I've been waiting my whole life for you without knowing it. Like every hardship I've endured was worth it because it brought me to that canyon at exactly the right moment to save you. Like you're not just someone I want to protect, but someone I want to share everything with. My home, my dreams, my future. Eva leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. That's a lot to promise someone you've only known for 3 days. Time doesn't change what I feel, Colt said firmly. I knew you were mine the moment I saw you trapped under that wagon. The rest is just details. When Eva opened her eyes, she saw her own growing feelings reflected in Colt's steady gaze. The truth was, she felt safer and more cherished in this rough cabin with this dangerous man than she ever had in her privileged life in Denver. Colt saw her not as an ornament or a burden, but as a woman capable of strength and worthy of devotion. I want to say yes, she admitted quietly, but I'm scared. Of what? Of not being enough. Of disappointing you when you get to know the real me. Of being just another responsibility instead of someone you truly want. Colt's hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her golden hair. Eva, darling, you could never be just a responsibility to me. You're the woman I want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life. You're the person I want to tell about my day, the one I want to share my thoughts and dreams with. You're not another burden. You're the reason I want to be a better man. The sincerity in his voice broke down the last of Eva's defenses. Then yes, she whispered, I want to stay. I want to see what we can build together. Colt's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her lips. Thank you, he said softly, for trusting me, for giving us a chance. Thank you, Eva replied, for seeing something in me worth fighting for when I couldn't see it myself. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the cabin and the strength of Colt's presence, Eva realized that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings came from the most devastating endings. Sometimes being broken was just the first step toward being remade into something stronger, something better. Sometimes being claimed by the right person was exactly the same thing as claiming yourself. 2 weeks into Eva's recovery, their peaceful existence was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Colt was outside chopping wood while Eva sat on the porch mending one of his shirts, a domestic scene that had become as natural as breathing. The moment he heard the hoofbeats echoing off the canyon walls, every muscle in his body went rigid with alertness. Ava, he said quietly, not turning around but letting his voice carry the urgency he felt. Go inside. Now. Eva's hand stilled on the shirt. She had learned to read the subtle changes in Colt's posture and tone, and right now everything about him screamed danger. How many? She asked, already moving toward the door. 3, maybe 4. Armed. Colt set down the axe and moved with fluid grace toward the rifle he always kept within reach. Ava, listen to me very carefully. There's a loaded shotgun behind the kitchen door and extra ammunition in the drawer beneath it. If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, you shoot first and ask questions later. Colt, do you understand me? His gray eyes met hers, and Eva saw something there that made her blood run cold. This wasn't the gentle, caring man who had been nursing her back to health. This was the bounty hunter who had survived by being faster and deadlier than everyone hunting him. I understand, Eva said, her voice steadier than she felt. The riders came into view as Eva reached the safety of the cabin. 3 men on horseback, wearing the kind of mismatched clothing and hard expressions that marked them as outlaws. Even from inside, Eva could see the leader clearly. A thin man with red hair and a beard, his hat tilted at an arrogant angle. Her blood turned to ice as recognition hit her. Jeremiah Red Hawkins, the leader of the Crimson Canyon Gang. The man who had ordered the massacre that killed her fiancé and left her broken under that wagon. Through the window, she watched Colt stand with deceptive casualness in the middle of the yard, his rifle held loosely in his hands but ready to move in an instant. He looked relaxed, almost bored, but Eva could see the coiled tension in every line of his body. Well, well, Hawkins called out as he reined in his horse about 20 feet from Colt. If it isn't Colt McCready, heard you were sniffing around our trail? Word gets around, Colt replied easily. $5,000 bounty tends to attract attention. Hawkins laughed, but there was no humor in it. 5,000? Hell, McCready, I'm flattered. Didn't know I was worth that much to them government boys. You're not worth much to anyone anymore, Red. Your boys here know you've been marked for death? Eva saw the 2 riders flanking Hawkins exchange glances. Good. Colt was trying to divide them, make them question their loyalty to a man with such a high price on his head. Boys are loyal, Hawkins said, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Besides, we didn't come here to talk about bounties. We came because my tracker says you got something that belongs to us. Colt's grip on his rifle tightened almost imperceptibly. Don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Hawkins' cold eyes swept the cabin behind Colt. Pretty little blonde thing from that wagon train. Jake saw her all bloody and figured she was dead. But tracks don't lie, McCready. You pulled someone out of that canyon, and I'm betting it was her. You're betting wrong. Am I? Hawkins nudged his horse a few steps closer. See, the thing is, that girl saw our faces. She's what you might call a loose end, and I don't like loose ends. Eva's hands trembled as she reached for the shotgun behind the door. Through the window, she could see Colt's shoulders set in a way that spoke of deadly intent. Well, you're out of luck, Colt said conversationally, because there's nobody here but me, and I don't much like visitors. That's so? Hawkins gestured to one of his men, who immediately began circling around toward the cabin side. Jake, why don't you go take a look inside? Make sure, Mr. McCready here is telling the truth. The moment Jake moved toward the cabin, Colt exploded into action. His rifle came up in one smooth motion, the first shot taking Jake from his saddle before the man could clear his weapon. The second shot shattered the shoulder of the rider to Hawkins' left, sending him screaming to the ground. But Hawkins was faster than his men. His gun was already in his hand, aimed squarely at Colt's chest. Drop it, McCready, Hawkins snarled. Drop it or I'll put a bullet through your heart. Colt froze, his rifle still raised but his finger off the trigger. The standoff stretched taut as a wire, both men knowing that whoever moved first would likely die. That's when Eva made her decision. She couldn't watch the man she loved die protecting her. Couldn't hide inside while Colt faced down 3 killers alone. The shotgun felt heavy in her hands as she stepped onto the porch, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Let him go, Hawkins. All 3 men turned toward her voice. Hawkins's eyes widened with recognition and triumph, while Colt's face went white with fury and fear. Ava, get back inside, Colt commanded. Well, I'll be damned, Hawkins said, his gun never wavering from Colt's chest. The pretty little witness herself. This just got a whole lot easier. Did it? Eva asked, taking another step forward. The shotgun was trained squarely on Hawkins' chest, and at this range, she couldn't possibly miss. Because from where I'm standing, you're the one caught in the middle. Hawkins glanced between Eva and Colt, clearly trying to calculate his odds. His wounded man was still on the ground, groaning and clutching his shoulder. Jake was dead. That left just him against two armed opponents. You're bluffing, Hawkins said finally. Rich girl like you never fired a gun in her life. Eva's lips curved in a cold smile that would have made Colt proud if he hadn't been terrified for her safety. You're right. I never had to before. But you killed my fiancé, you bastard. You think I won't pull this trigger? Something in her voice must have convinced Hawkins that she meant every word, because his gun hand wavered slightly. Eva, Colt said quietly, never taking his eyes off Hawkins. On my count, drop down. 1, 2. Wait, Hawkins raised his free hand. Wait now. No need for anyone else to die here. Maybe we can work something out. The only thing we're working out, Colt said coldly, is how fast you can ride out of my canyon before I put a bullet through your spine. Our canyon, Eva corrected firmly, and despite the deadly situation, Colt felt a surge of possessive pride at her words. Hawkins looked between them again, seeing something in their united front that made his calculations change. This ain't over, McCready. That bounty works both ways. There's plenty of men who'd pay good money to know where to find the famous Colt McCready. Let them come, Colt said simply. Won't be the first time. With a curse that turned the air blue, Hawkins wheeled his horse around and spurred it toward the canyon entrance, leaving his wounded companion to struggle onto his own mount and follow. In moments they were gone, but the echo of hoofbeats and threats lingered in the air. The moment they were out of sight, Colt spun toward Eva, his face a mask of fury and terror. What the hell did you think you were doing? He roared, striding toward the porch. I told you to stay inside. I wasn't going to let you die for me, Eva shot back, though now that the adrenaline was fading, she was beginning to shake. I couldn't hide while you faced them alone. Colt reached her in 3 long strides, his hands gripping her shoulders almost roughly. Eva, you could have been killed if Hawkins had decided to shoot you instead of trying to negotiate. But he didn't, Eva interrupted. We're both alive, and he's gone. For now. Colt's grip gentled, but the fear in his eyes remained. Damn it, woman, you're going to be the death of me. Better than being the death of you by hiding like a coward, Eva replied, though her voice was softer now. Colt stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her roughly into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again, he said against her hair. Don't ever put yourself in danger like that. I can't lose you, Eva. I won't survive it. Then don't ask me to survive losing you either, Eva whispered back, her arms wrapping around his waist. We're in this together, Colt. All of it. The good and the bad. Colt pulled back to look at her, seeing his own fierce devotion reflected in her blue eyes. You realize this changes things, he said quietly. Hawkins will be back, probably with more men. And now he knows you're here, knows you're the witness who can identify him. This place isn't safe anymore. Then we'll make it safe, Eva said firmly. Or we'll go somewhere else. But we'll do it together. Together, Colt agreed, pressing his forehead against hers. But next time I tell you to stay inside when there's danger, you stay inside. Next time you don't face danger alone, Eva countered. We're partners now, remember? Colt's smile was part exasperation, part admiration, and entirely devoted. Partners, he agreed. God help us both. As they stood there in the aftermath of violence, holding each other in the golden afternoon light, both of them knew that their peaceful interlude was over. The world had found them, with all its dangers and complications. But they also knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Eva Sterling was no longer a broken woman hiding from the world. She was Eva McCready to be, and she was ready to fight for the life and love she had chosen. And God help anyone who tried to take it away from her. 3 days after Hawkins' visit, Colt made a decision that changed everything. Eva woke to find him standing by the window, fully dressed and armed, his face set in lines of grim determination she had come to recognize. "You're going after him," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "He'll be back," Colt replied without turning around. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he'll come back with more men, and next time, we might not be so lucky. I won't wait for him to choose the time and place." Eva rose from the bed, her legs now strong enough to carry her without pain, and crossed to stand beside him. Through the window, she could see Rebel already saddled and waiting in the pre-dawn darkness. "Then I'm coming with you." "Like hell you are." Colt's voice was flat, final. "This isn't some romantic adventure, Eva. I'm going to kill him and anyone who stands with him. I won't have you seeing that side of me." "I've already seen it," Eva pointed out gently. 3 days ago, when you shot Jake off his horse without hesitation, and I'm still here. That was different. That was protecting you. And this is protecting us." Eva placed her hand on his arm, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. "Colt, you can't ask me to sit here wondering if you're coming back. You can't ask me to wait and hope and pray while the man I love rides off to face our enemies alone." "The man you love?" Colt's voice softened despite his resolve. Eva felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't back down. "Yes, the man I love, which is exactly why I'm not letting you go alone." Colt turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Eva, darling, if something happened to you, I'd spend the rest of my life wishing I'd been there to prevent it," Eva interrupted. "We're partners, remember? That means we face everything together." For a long moment, Colt searched her face, seeing the determination that matched his own. Finally, his shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. "You're not going to change your mind about this, are you?" "Not a chance." "Then we do this my way," Colt said firmly. "You follow my orders without question. You stay behind cover when I tell you to, and if I say run, you run. Agreed?" "Agreed," Eva said, though they both knew she'd make her own decisions when the time came. An hour later, they were riding through the mountain passes toward the outlaw camp Colt had been tracking for weeks. Eva rode her own horse now, a gentle mare named Stella that Colt had acquired from a trader. And despite the danger they were riding toward, she felt more alive than she had in months. "There," Colt said, as they crested a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. Below them, smoke rose from a ramshackle camp, where perhaps a dozen men were preparing for what looked like another raid. "Hawkins is expanding his operation." Eva counted the figures moving around the camp, her heart sinking. "There are too many of them, Colt." Even with the element of surprise. "I'm not planning to fight them all," Colt said, pulling out a spyglass to study the camp more closely. "Just the ones stupid enough to get in my way when I go after Hawkins." "What's the plan?" Colt lowered the spyglass and turned to her, his expression serious. "The plan is that you stay here with the rifles while I go down there and end this. When it's over, I'll signal you." "That's not a plan. That's a suicide mission," Eva protested. "Colt, please, there has to be another way." "There is." Colt's voice was quiet but certain. "But it requires you to trust me completely." Eva studied his face, seeing something there that she hadn't seen before. Not just determination, but peace. As if he had finally accepted something he'd been fighting against for years. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. Colt was quiet for a moment, his gaze returning to the camp below. "I sent word to the territorial marshal 3 days ago. Told him where to find Hawkins and when. They should be positioning themselves on the other side of that valley right about now." Eva's eyes widened. "You set a trap." "I set a trap," Colt confirmed, "but traps can be unpredictable. That's why I need you up here, safe, where you can get away if things go wrong." Before Eva could respond, the sound of gunfire echoed up from the valley below. Through the spyglass, they could see the outlaw camp erupting into chaos as federal marshals attacked from 3 sides simultaneously. "It's starting," Colt said, swinging into Rebel's saddle. "Eva, I need you to promise me something." "What? If I don't come back?" "Don't." Eva's voice was sharp with fear and fury. "Don't you dare say goodbye to me, Colt McCready. You promised me a future together, and I'm holding you to that promise." Colt's smile was full of love and wonder. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be back." You better be, Eva called after him as he spurred Rebel down the slope toward the chaos below. Because I have plans for you. What followed was the longest hour of Eva's life. Through the spyglass, she watched Colt move through the battle like an avenging angel, his guns blazing as he cut a path toward where Hawkins was barricaded behind an overturned wagon. She saw him take down two men who tried to flank him, saw him dive for cover as bullets whined past his head, saw him never waver from his objective. And then, suddenly, it was over. The gunfire ceased, smoke drifted across the valley, and Eva could see Colt standing over a still figure that could only be Red Hawkins. Even from this distance, she could see the tension leave his shoulders as he holstered his guns. It was finished. Colt's signal, his hat waved high over his head, sent Eva racing down the slope toward him, her heart pounding with relief and joy. She found him talking to a tall man wearing a marshal's badge, but the moment he saw her approaching, everything else became secondary. "Ava!" he breathed, catching her as she launched herself into his arms. "It's over, darling." "It's finally over." "Are you hurt?" Eva asked, her hands moving over his chest and arms, checking for injuries. "Not a scratch," Colt assured her, though she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Hawkins is dead, and the marshal has rounded up the rest of his gang. The bounty's mine, and more importantly, no one's coming after us anymore." Marshal Thompson, a grizzled veteran with kind eyes, cleared his throat politely. "Mr. McCready, Miss Sterling, I'll need you both to come to town to give statements, but that can wait a day or two. You've been through enough." "Thank you, Marshal," Eva said gratefully. "We appreciate your help." "Just doing my job, ma'am. Though I have to say, it's nice to see justice done for those poor folks in the wagon train." Thompson tipped his hat. "You two take care of each other." As the marshal and his men prepared to leave with their prisoners, Colt turned to Eva, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "So," he said softly, "we're free. No more looking over our shoulders, no more worrying about who might come after us. What do you want to do with the rest of our lives?" Eva's smile was radiant. "I want to go home. Our home. I want to finish mending that shirt of yours and learn to make your favorite dinner. I want to read those books of yours by the fire and hear you tell me stories about your adventures. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night." "Is that a proposal, Miss Sterling?" Colt asked with a grin that transformed his entire face. "Actually," Eva said, reaching into her pocket and pulling out something that made Colt's breath catch, "it is." In her palm lay a ring. Not the elaborate diamond engagement ring her former fiancé had given her, but a simple gold band that had belonged to her grandmother. She had been carrying it since the attack, a small piece of her past that she had managed to save. "Evangeline Sterling," Colt said solemnly, taking the ring from her palm, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Will you let me love you and protect you and cherish you for all the days of my life?" "Only if you promise to let me love and protect and cherish you right back," Eva replied, tears streaming down her face. "Because that's what partners do, Colt McCready. They take care of each other." "Partners," Colt agreed, slipping the ring onto her finger. "For life." The kiss that sealed their engagement was witnessed by mountains and sky, by the smoke of battle clearing and the promise of peace ahead. It tasted of joy and hope and the kind of love that could survive anything the world threw at it. 6 months later, Evangeline McCready stood in the garden behind their cabin, hanging laundry on the line and humming softly to herself. Her legs were completely healed now, strong enough to carry her on long walks through the mountains with her husband. The nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams of the future they were building together. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up, but there was no fear anymore, only anticipation. Colt rode into the yard with a grin on his face and a letter in his hand. "Good news?" Eva asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "The territorial governor is offering me a job as a special marshal," Colt said, dismounting and pulling her into his arms. "Legitimate law work, good pay, and I'd be home most nights." "And the bounty hunting?" "Over," Colt said firmly. "From now on, the only thing I want to hunt is your smile every morning and your kiss every night." Eva laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like music. "In that case, Marshal McCready, I think you've already caught what you're looking for. Have I? Colt asked, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. Oh yes, Eva said when he set her down, her arms wrapping around his neck. You caught me completely. Heart, soul, and everything in between. Good, Colt murmured against her lips. Because you belong with me, Evangeline McCready. Always and forever. Always and forever, Eva agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of home and hope and happily ever after. In the distance, thunder rumbled over the mountains, but here in their sheltered canyon, all was warmth and light and love that had conquered every obstacle in its path. Some stories end with the hero riding off into the sunset, but the best stories end with the hero riding home to the woman who chose to belong with him and who made him belong with her in return. 2 years after that blood-soaked morning in Crimson Canyon, Evangeline McCready stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Her hand rested protectively on the gentle swell of her belly, where their first child was growing strong and healthy. The cabin had grown along with their love. What had once been a simple refuge for a solitary bounty hunter was now a true home, complete with additional rooms, a proper kitchen, and a nursery that Colt had spent months perfecting. The walls were lined with books and photographs, and Eva's artwork, botanical sketches and portraits of their life together, decorated every surface. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. McCready, Colt's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and still capable of sending shivers down her spine after all this time. Eva turned to smile at her husband, taking in the sight of him in his marshal's uniform. The badge caught the light, but it was the contentment in his storm gray eyes that made her heart skip. Just thinking about how much has changed, she said, leaning into his embrace as his arms came around her from behind, his hands settling over hers on her belly. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. 2 years ago, your life was just beginning, Colt corrected, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. You just didn't know it yet. And you did. I knew that pulling you out from under that wagon was the most important thing I'd ever do, Colt said quietly. Everything else was just details. Eva laughed softly, the sound carrying across the canyon like music. Such romantic details. Gunfights, death threats, federal marshals. Don't forget the part where you proposed to me, Colt added with a grin she could hear in his voice. That was my favorite detail. Someone had to, Eva replied primly. You were taking forever. Their gentle banter was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, but unlike those terrifying moments 2 years ago, Eva felt no fear. These were expected visitors. Marshal Thompson and his wife Sarah, coming for dinner as they did every few weeks since moving to the area. Evening, Colt, Eva, Thompson called as he helped his wife down from her side saddle. Hope you don't mind us bringing company. Found these two wanderers looking for you. Eva's breath caught as two familiar figures emerged from behind the marshal's horses. Dr. Harrison from Denver, now grayer but still kind-eyed, and beside him, a woman Eva had never expected to see again. Mrs. Patterson, Eva gasped, recognizing her former neighbor from Denver society. My dear Evangeline, Mrs. Patterson said warmly, hurrying up the porch steps to embrace her. Or should I say Mrs. McCready now? Look at you, absolutely glowing. And expecting, I see. But what are you doing here? Eva asked, still stunned by the unexpected reunion. Dr. Harrison stepped forward with a gentle smile. Word reached Denver about your adventures and about your marriage to Marshal McCready here. Mrs. Patterson was quite insistent that we make the journey to see for ourselves that you were happy and well. More than well, Eva said firmly, Colt's arms tightening around her. I'm home. As they all settled in for dinner, Eva found herself marveling at how natural it felt to welcome guests into their home, to share their story and their happiness with others. The shy, broken woman who had been trapped under that wagon seemed like a different person entirely. You know, Mrs. Patterson said as they lingered over coffee and Eva's apple pie, there was quite a scandal in Denver when news of your situation reached society circles. Eva tensed slightly, but Colt's hand found hers under the table, steady and reassuring. What kind of scandal? Eva asked, though she suspected she knew. Oh, the usual nonsense, Mrs. Patterson waved dismissively. Whispers about propriety and reputation, and what would become of you, living unmarried with a bounty hunter in the wilderness. Quite a few tongues wagging, I'm afraid. And what did you tell them? Colt asked, his voice carrying just enough edge to remind everyone present that he was still a dangerous man when it came to protecting his wife. Mrs. Patterson's eyes twinkled with mischief. I told them that Evangeline Sterling had always been too spirited for Denver society anyway, and that any man brave enough to win her heart was probably worth 10 of their soft, pampered sons. Eva laughed, surprised and delighted by her former neighbor's defense. You didn't. Oh, I most certainly did. And I told them that from what I'd heard, you'd found yourself a real man who would move heaven and earth to protect you, rather than one of those proper gentlemen who would abandon you at the first sign of trouble. Dr. Harrison nodded approvingly. Speaking as someone who knew your former fiancée, Mrs. McCready, I can say with certainty that you made a significant improvement in your choice of husband. Hear, hear. Marshall Thompson raised his coffee cup in a toast. To Colt and Eva McCready, who proved that the best love stories are the ones where two people choose each other against all odds. As the evening wore on and their guests prepared to stay the night in the cabin's extra rooms, Eva found herself on the porch again with Colt, looking up at stars that seemed brighter somehow than they had in the past. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly, giving up the freedom of the bounty hunting life for domestic responsibilities. Colt turned to face her, his hands framing her face with the same tender reverence he'd shown her from the very beginning. Eva, darling, you are my freedom. Before you, I was just a man running from his ghosts, never staying anywhere long enough to build anything real. You didn't trap me. You set me free to become the man I was meant to be. And what man is that? Your husband, Colt said simply. The father of our children. The person who gets to wake up next to you every morning and thank God for the day that brought me to Crimson Canyon at exactly the right moment to save you. To save each other, Eva corrected gently. To save each other, Colt agreed, sealing the words with a kiss that still made her toes curl. Later that night, as they lay in bed listening to the gentle sounds of their guests settling in for the evening, Eva traced patterns on Colt's chest with her fingertip. Colt? When our baby is old enough to understand, what are we going to tell them about how we met? Colt was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. We'll tell them the truth. That sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the darkest moments, that their mother was the bravest, strongest woman who ever lived, and that their father was the luckiest man alive because he found her when she needed him most. And that we chose each other, Eva added, every day over and over again. Every day, Colt confirmed, because that's what belonging really means. Not that someone owns you, but that you found the person you want to choose, again and again, no matter what life throws at you. Eva smiled against his chest, feeling their child move gently within her. I love you, Colt McCready. I love you too, Evangeline McCready, more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Even when I'm stubborn and argumentative, especially when you're stubborn and argumentative, Colt chuckled. It's one of your most endearing qualities. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Eva reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the horror of that wagon train attack, to the terror of being trapped and broken, to the miracle of being saved by a man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. She had learned that belonging wasn't about being possessed or controlled. It was about finding someone who celebrated your strength while offering their own. Someone who chose to stand beside you rather than in front of you. Someone who made you feel like the best version of yourself. And in the morning, she would wake up in the arms of that someone, ready to face another day of building the life they had chosen together. In the distance, coyotes sang their ancient songs to the moon. But here in their canyon sanctuary, all was peace and love, and the quiet contentment that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged. Some love stories are about passion that burns hot and fast. Others are about gentle affection that grows slowly over time. But the very best love stories are about two souls who recognize each other across all the noise and chaos of the world, who choose each other not just once, but every single day, and who build something together that is stronger than anything they could have created alone. This was one of those stories, and it was just beginning. And so, in the golden canyons of Colorado Territory, where eagles soared on mountain thermals and wildflowers bloomed in defiance of the harsh wilderness, the greatest protection love story of the American frontier reached its perfect conclusion. Evangeline McCready, once a broken socialite begging to be left to die, had become a woman who chose life, love, and belonging with every breath she took. Their story became legend throughout the Colorado Territory, not just because of the dramatic rescue or the final showdown with the Crimson Canyon Gang, but because of what it proved about the transformative power of being truly seen, truly chosen, and truly protected by someone who loves you not despite your brokenness, but because of your strength to survive it. You see, this wasn't just a tale of a cowboy saving a damsel in distress, though Colt's courage in that moment was undeniable. This was a story about recognition, about two souls who looked at each other and saw not what the world expected them to see, but what they truly were beneath the surface. Colt didn't see a ruined socialite. He saw a survivor with the heart of a warrior. Ava didn't see a dangerous bounty hunter. She saw a protector with the soul of a healer. But perhaps the most beautiful part of their story was how it redefined what it means to belong to someone. In a world that often confused possession with protection and control with care, Colt and Eva proved that true belonging is always a choice, one that must be made fresh every single day. It's not about someone owning you, it's about finding someone whose arms feel like home, whose presence makes you braver than you ever thought possible, and whose love gives you the strength to become the best version of yourself. The McCready family legacy rippled outward through the territory like stones thrown into still water. Their children grew up understanding that love was not weakness, but the greatest strength, that protection meant standing beside someone rather than in front of them, and that the most beautiful families were built not on blood alone, but on the conscious choice to keep choosing each other through every storm. Marshal Colt McCready became renowned not just for his skill with a gun, but for his unwavering devotion to justice, tempered with mercy. He never again had to hunt men for bounty, instead serving as a bridge between the old lawless West and the civilization that was slowly taking root in the wilderness. His reputation for protecting the innocent and his absolute integrity made him a legend in law enforcement circles. Eva McCready became something the territory had rarely seen, a woman who transformed trauma into strength, who built a life of purpose from the ashes of tragedy. Her botanical artwork was eventually displayed in the territorial capital, and her quiet advocacy for other women who had survived violence created a network of support that saved countless lives. But visitors to their canyon home always remarked on the same thing: the way Colt and Eva looked at each other, even after decades of marriage, as if they were still amazed by their good fortune in finding one another. The way his hand would automatically find hers whenever she entered a room. The way her face would light up when she heard his horse approaching home. The way they moved together like two parts of the same soul, each making the other more than they could ever be alone. Their love story reminds us that in a world often defined by taking land, taking resources, taking what we can get, the most powerful force remains giving. Giving protection, giving trust, giving the vulnerable parts of ourselves to someone who will guard them as carefully as their own heart. In our modern age, where relationships often seem disposable and commitment feels outdated, the story of Colt and Eva McCready offers a timeless truth. Real love is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone whose imperfections fit yours, whose damage complements your healing, whose strength shores up your weaknesses while your strength shores up theirs. So the next time you hear someone say, "I can't be with someone who's been through so much," remember the cowboy who heard, "Leave me here to die," and responded, "Never. You belong with me." Remember that the most beautiful love stories often begin with the words, "I'm too broken for anyone to want," and end with, "Exactly where you belong." Remember that true protection isn't about keeping someone weak and dependent. It's about giving them the safety and support they need to become everything they were meant to be. If this epic love story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe to Wild West Stories. We bring you the most incredible tales of love, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that built America. What's your favorite moment from Colt and Eva's journey? Was it the rescue, the first belong with me moment, or watching Eva find her strength? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing how these frontier love stories inspire you. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that broken doesn't mean worthless, that protection and strength can coexist, and that the right person will see your value even when you can't see it yourself. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly Western romances that prove love conquers all. Next week, The Outlaw's Christmas Redemption, how a gunslinger's heart was stolen by a small-town angel. Until then, remember, in the wild west of life, the greatest adventures happen when we choose to belong with someone who sees our worth, protects our dreams, and loves us not despite our scars, but because they're proof of our strength to survive. Keep riding toward love, and never forget, you always belong with the right person, always.